So the girls learn to shut up, don't say anything, live with it. And this is the kind of atmosphere and the culture that you have created in your school, where girls who are uncomfortable sharing a locker room with a biological boy now learns, deal with your discomfort and shut your freaking mouth, or we're going to punish you.
This episode is brought to you by Chase & Tail, the gear brand for folks who'd rather smell like deer piss and fish guts than cologne. Whether you're in a stand freezing your tail off or knee-deep in the river lying to your buddies about the one that got away, Chase & Tail's got you covered. Built tough, no gimmicks, no glitter, just the kind of gear your granddad would respect. Check out chaseandtail.com and chase something worth bragging about.
Welcome to Cumberland Unfiltered Podcast. Just to get started here, my name is Caleb, the suburban country boy. And Jay's always rolls his eye when I say that. And then El Dino Toro.
Yeah, Boogeyman of Cumberland.
Boogeyman of Cumberland. So
well, I'm being overtaken by the new Boogeyman of Cumberland, Andrew Bacon.
He's in the shadows. Oh, and
he's
guess
not in
what?
the shadows. Did you watch the last school committee meeting?
Well, I'm when I say in the shadows, I mean not on the show shadows.
Oh.
He's the scalpel. You're the chainsaw. Anyway, master of the stick races.
Yeah,
Andrew Bacon. Hey, thanks for...
Andrew used to be on the podcast.
Gotcha.
And he's guest hosting for Brad tonight.
Yeah.
And then tonight, we have a special guest, Ann Marie Banfield. She is a political consultant, a nationally recognized advocate for curriculum transparency, education reform, and parental rights. She's also a prolific contributor to Granite Grok, where she publishes dozens of investigative articles on what's really happening inside today's classrooms.
Correct.
And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, our assistant producer, I don't want to say the name, Greg. It's not Greg, but he came across you or across some articles or something that I don't know what it was exactly he came across, but he came across your writings, and he was like, this lady, we got to get this lady on. And here we are.
Yeah, we when I ran for school committee this last election, I ran on making the schools follow their own policies.
Oh,
and
how nice.
Yeah, which they just pick and choose the policies they want to follow, and they pick and choose who they want to enforce the policies against. And the other thing I ran on was parental rights, our transgender policy. I read an article that you wrote, and you quoted one of the transgender policies in one of the schools in New Hampshire, and ours is there must be somewhere that they all get the same policy language.
Right.
So it was should teachers lie to parents? Democrats in New Hampshire said yes, and the guidance that they had is almost identical to what's in our policy.
Isn't that funny how they all landed in the same, the same language in different states? Yeah.
Yeah. So that was what I ran on, and when I got elected, there's some pushback, but I said, hey, that's what I ran on, and that's what I'm doing. So we're in the middle of that now.
Should teachers lie to parents?
Well, it doesn't say lie. It says they're prohibited from using the gender identity of the student in official communications with the teachers.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that with Bob a little bit, didn't we? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Ann. What is so there's a couple There's a couple topics that we wanted to touch tonight. One was public schools as the largest mental health institution in the U.S. and then parental rights in education.
Right.
Those are a couple of the big topics that we wanted to cover with you. You're out of New Hampshire.
Yes, and so, I've been doing this for probably about 20 years, and really, I just started, back then, my kids were young, and I just wanted to really understand what was going on in the schools so I could make good decisions for them. And I connected with people all around the country and who had the same kind of vision. Just, teach my kids academics. I'll do the parenting. Thank you very much. That kind of thing. And connecting with all of these people, I'm talking about professors at colleges, advocates for parents, things like that wanted good curriculum, wanted to make sure that the parents were supported, wanted to make sure that you had highly qualified teachers in the classroom, and just basic, what you would think that everybody would want in public education or education in general. And what I found out back then is that there seems to be this faction where you have people that just want to funnel money to the schools, and they don't care how it's spent. They don't care if you get quality out of it. They don't really care about what you're spending the money on. And then what I did is I found people who cared about making sure that kids who entered our public schools or any schools, that those kids were receiving a quality education. And it's doable. It is really, people can do that in their own states, in their own towns. But a lot of times you have to fight, you have to fight. And, Massachusetts is the perfect example. Prior to 2010, prior to Common Core, their students were finishing at the top in the country. And they could compete with students in Singapore who finished top in the world. And now, that has gone down, the scores have gone down. And I just can't believe that people in Massachusetts aren't in an uproar. Right. I can't even believe you had the best quality public schools and you've just let them go. And for what? And so what happens is people just pull their kids out and they're just going to go to a private school. They're going to find, parents who have the means are going to find the best for their kids. But it is doable, and I just don't understand why we can't get our act together and really have the best public schools in the world. There's no reason.
Yeah, for the amount of money we spend on it.
Right. When do you think that the shift from academic institutions started to more wellness centers, as I've seen you put it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, honestly, academic-wise, public schools really started failing in the 50s. And then, of course, you have the introduction of the U.S. Department of Education in the early 70s, and that didn't really help things. But what you're pointing to is really where public schools became more focused on mental health of children. And I've been highly critical of that since day one, because you have one thing to do, and that is to really teach the kids the academics. Mental health is very important. I don't want to diminish that, because that is extremely important for any parent. Schools, they are concerned. I understand their concern, but you are having trouble teaching these kids to read. Since when do you think that you can now become their mental health provider? And that's really where we have shifted. And that began, I would probably say, right around the time we were coming out of COVID. That was the perfect excuse to start really hiring more school counselors, school psychologists, social workers into the schools. We also had, back in, I think it was 2017, when the Every Student Succeeds Act was passed into law, that was signed by President Obama, and that would replace No Child Left Behind. And so that's 1,061 pages of federal law in your classroom, and most people have never read it. Most superintendents, maybe they've read it, I don't know, I'm not really sure, but it really changed the focus of public education away from academic excellence to more of the culture. We got to focus on the culture of the school versus whereas No Child Left Behind was focused on test scores. What's better? I don't know what's better, but nothing has improved since that law was signed back years ago. So that's when we started seeing, we're going to hire more, more of these people into the schools. And the federal government was funding this through grants. So, of course, free money, they're like crack addicts. Let's go apply for a grant. Let's get this money into the school. And now we're going to focus on, the mental health of our children. So that came with social emotional learning, which all of these things sound so great. We're going to help these kids. And, but you're not realizing that, number one, that takes time away from learning the academics. If you're spending time on social emotional learning, you're not focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's just the facts. And so, and in the past, you would have like kids who had behavior problems. I'm sure you guys probably remember when you'd have to go down to the principal's office and you got in trouble and you got your parents called. Well, now the focus is on teachers manage your class. Teachers deal with it. And so, the teachers are in the position where now I have to deal with all of these issues. So now we have to spend more money to train teachers on how to manage their class. We have to spend more money on school counselors. We have to spend more money on these school psychologists. And what are we getting for that? Because now behavior is out of control.
Yeah.
It's a slap on the wrist. And so you're not really, I'm not seeing the improvement. Matter of fact, in New Hampshire, we're seeing just the opposite. We're seeing teachers leaving, going to school board meetings saying, behavior is out of control. And, you have counselors, quite frankly, who I'm sure that they're trying to do a good job, but they're not child psychologists.
Right.
So if they're dealing with any trauma, if they're dealing with any depression or anxiety, this is something that as a parent, and I have a child psychologist. I have a couple of them that I will consult with, and they've been so helpful, helping me to understand why they pulled their kids out of public schools when this started happening, because they were like, no counselors are going to deal with my kids if there's any issues that come up anyway, because they're not qualified.
Yeah.
They don't have clinical training. They don't have the education. And it's kind of like if your kid has cancer, do you want to send them? I love, school nurses. They're great at what they do. But if this is something serious, you don't want the school nurse treating your child for childhood cancer. So some of these mental health issues are very serious. And so when they bring this all into the classroom and we do class therapy, you're bringing out sometimes trauma. And this is what these people have helped me to understand, that can be actually detrimental to a child, pretending like you can solve mental health problems in a classroom. So we see problems with it.
So you're saying that in the classrooms, when they are trying to deal with this as a one-size-fits-all, some students that wouldn't usually have issues, things start to come up in their lives and they start to either hallucinate that they're having this stuff, or is that kind of what you're saying, or that they're well, I can give you a good example. It's not quite along that line, but I had a parent one time who contacted me and said, my son was in the lunchroom and he had a plastic knife and he was playing swords with his friend and he scraped his friend's arm, and the friend went down and got a Band-Aid put on. He was sent to the school psychologist where they did a psych test on him. And, as I was talking to the dad, and I was just like, these are the kinds of things, if your son decides to go into the military or the police academy at some point, this is now in his record of having a psych test, will this keep him out of special forces? Will this keep him out of the, police academy? Things like that, that these are the long-term consequences to something so simple that, you are guys, I'm a mom of 2 boys, and I'm thinking this is normal. This is just normal things. And how is this going to follow this child? And we have so much tracking now of children, of their behaviors and their things like that how is this going to follow that child? And a lot of this information was going to the federal government. Is it going there now? I did see some movement on that in terms of trying to stop this kind of data mining of information on kids. I mean, quite frankly, what I know,
my child will never, if my child was in a public school, would never see a school counselor. And I have school counselors who are whistleblowers who contact me and tell me what's going on. And I love them for what they're doing, and they're trying as best they can. But at the same time, knowing what this can do long term, I would never let my child see, if they needed mental help, they're going to an outside organization where privacy is key, because your information is not private in the schools. We found that in New Hampshire. We found that school counselors were told to share information with Keene State, who was...
So HIPAA doesn't matter in that in a public school?
No, because there's loopholes in the federal law that protects student privacy. So you're probably familiar with FERPA. That is the federal privacy law for students. And there's now loopholes. That loophole wasn't there back in, I think Obama gutted it, I think in 2016. Yeah. So now you can get this information on students if you're an education researcher. Well, I'm an education researcher, so can I get this information on your kids? Wow. I mean, that's scary.
Have you? Have you?
No, I would never ask for it. Oh, okay. I would never ask for it. But we saw some of this information leaving the school and going to Keene State, who prepared a report for the federal government. Because in order to get the grant money to bring all this into the school, now you have to have this organization report back to the federal government. So now they're getting all the data on these kids. And, I blew it up in New Hampshire and just, I went to the commissioner, I went to all the legislators, and I'm like, look at what's going on. And, it's scary.
So, Bacon, what are you seeing this as I
was just going to say, it's there's a couple of similarities in some of the things that you said. Guidance counselors, when I was in school, guidance counselors' intention was, primarily to help you select your classes for either the following year and or help prep you to the transition of college or whatever type of after, school path you were going down. You did make a statement that was interesting, and I could see the similarity with, I had met, and I know Jason had met also, we had met with different times, we met with the teachers union, and both, they had said that one of the biggest issues that they're having is discipline in classes. And it's interesting to hear that, because we have an exuberant amount of interventionists, they call them, and things of that nature to help kind of rear this, to stop this from happening. And it sounds like, that's not working, that's not helping them, it's not benefiting them. And, there could be a bunch of different things that are causing that to happen, lack of discipline, or, just kind of, it's a slang way to say it, like empty threats, like there's no holding these kids to, being responsible for their actions. So, hopefully we can...
Inconsistencies too.
Right.
We got an email, we all got an email about one of the middle schools in Cumberland covering up bullying because they didn't want to hurt their scores, and...
I'm going through that right now with a parent in New Hampshire. Right now. They don't want to call it bullying, so we're just going to call it something else. Yeah. We don't have to report it.
And then we have a policy, and our policy has every tool that the administration has at their discretion to be able to discipline students, and they're just using off policy disciplinary tools. One of the first things that we encountered was a text message from a parent whose son brought something to the administration's attention, and he was on a National Honor Society, and he was threatened with removal from his position on the National Honor Society. Well, there's nowhere in the manual that says that is a form of discipline that you're allowed. It was just a scare tactic to get him there, And then there are other parents that contact us and say, they gave my son or daughter a detention, and the other person they didn't do anything with. And the policy clearly states, the reason I got involved in the school committee, I ran for the school committee, was my son was assaulted at school. And when you talked about FERPA earlier, there was a full investigation that happened. They did it in executive session. And they did it in executive session because there were minors involved, and they said you can't dissect his portion of the story out from the other kids. So they wouldn't do it in open. I went and opened a public comment and said what was going on in public comment because that's my right. I want people to know. They spent $80,000 on an investigation that took 6 months. So from the time I made my first complaint until the time my son was adjudicated of this, it was about 350 days. I'm a retired Army guy. The average parent doesn't have 350 days to be able to fight this. So most of them, they still do. They stonewall people until they just give up. Just give up.
It takes a lot of time. A lot of time and resources have to go into fighting. So, go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. So in the end, it was discovered that yes, they violated the policies. The policies that were discovered they violated were policies that in the school committee meeting where the school committee overturned my son's suspension and disciplined 5-0 of the 5 members that were there. The athletic director admitted that they violated the policy. The superintendent would not discipline him. He decided to get an outside person to come and investigate for $80,000, wasting $80,000 in taxpayer. I even have an email that says, "Why would you need an outside person?" And he admitted it. I have the recording. I recorded the meeting. He admitted it in the meeting, but the investigation found yes, they violated the policy about leaving students alone, and the football coach and the athletic director violated the policy. Yes, they violated the policy. They put my minor son on an ambulance. He got knocked out cold and went into convulsions. They put him on an ambulance by himself and sent him. And their justification was, well, we were getting ready for a playoff game for football. That was their justification.
Wow. And
then they found none of them knew about the special needs inclusion policy, including the principal who said that it was updated. It was 2.5 years earlier. It was amended and updated. In the report, he says, I had no idea that policy existed. He's the principal of the high school, had no idea that there was a special needs inclusion policy. But they always tout, oh yeah, we're special needs friendly, special needs. So that's part of the discipline problem. When Andrew and I went to school, there was basically I went to school a lot earlier than Andrew, but there was you had a principal and you had an assistant principal.
Only one principal.
And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now we have a principal, an assistant principal, a dean of students, another 2 deans of students. They have their whole staff. You have the superintendents in the high school building. There's an assistant superintendent. Yep. It's an unbelievable amount of administration, and I noticed that you did talk about that in a few of your articles. But again, they do not know the policies, so when they go to enforce the policies, they enforce them either incorrectly or inconsistently. And Andrew and I, when we ran on the, you're going to get a certain amount of money, which we didn't do it for the money, for your two school committee meetings a month. How many do you think we've been going to a month?
There was one a week. I mean, at least
unbelievable amount.
Months.
We
Since
had
budget season, there was one a week. Honestly, sometimes 2.
The graduation, we had two emergency school committee meetings. The bus thing, another emergency. So they voted on this is how they do it because we're in the minority. We all voted on moving school start times back. Apparently, the dollar number that the superintendent used to scare us wasn't enough, so we passed it 5-2 to move them back to pre-COVID or pre-construction. We get all the COVID money to do ventilation construction.
Yep.
Well, the people who control the agenda were in the minority on that. The superintendent didn't want it, the chair didn't want it, so they just called an emergency meeting and came back at us with more fictitious higher numbers that scared everybody. And then they overturned it. It was 4-2 because one was on vacation.
How did that happen though? Like, all right, so do you see this stuff in New Hampshire?
Oh yeah, this is nationwide. This is a national problem. So and I think sometimes you think that this is a problem in your school, and I'm like, keep in mind, like in New Hampshire, like our superintendents make more than the governor.
Oh yeah.
And I look at this and I'm thinking, you make more than the governor, and you can't even teach kids basic math. You're picking out math programs that. I tutored math, also helped kids, years ago when my kids were in school. So I've looked at math programs, and I worked with some of the top mathematicians in the country on how to teach math and good math programs and things like that. And I can look at, I don't even have to open up the book and I can tell you if this is garbage or this is good, because I know what to look for. And so these guys, let me tell you, you can get a homeschool mom who can do better than the superintendent making more than our governor.
When did that math change? When did it become this new math? Because my grandmother, my mother, and myself, we all had the same math. I try to help my daughter out with homework, and it's like I'm looking at it, I'm like, boy, I could tell you how to get the answer this way, and I know it, but to get your way, I'm like,
yeah.
I gotta say it was early 2000s.
It's tough.
Actually, there was fuzzy math in the 90s, and that's really kind of when I started to get involved. That's when I got connected with all these mathematicians, and I can tell you I listened more than I contributed to those conversations because these guys were the best. And some of them were in Massachusetts. Some of them were involved in writing the academic standards in Massachusetts that brought that state up to where their students were finishing top in the country. And if you read the academic standards, they're basic math and they make sense. And you start with addition, then you go to subtraction, and then you go to multiplication. There's a logical progress to them.
Sure.
So we had fuzzy math back in the 90s. And so when that pretty much was a disaster, this is why they came up kind of with Common Core. And so they got, these people together to come up with Common Core. The great thing about it was at that time, this was back in like the early 2000s. So about 2008.
2010.
Yeah, 2010 is when they adopted. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so I knew some of the mathematicians that were working, that were chosen to sit on the validation committee. One being James Milgram, who is NASA mathematician. You're talking about one of the best mathematicians in the country.
Right.
And when it was finally said and done and they presented it, he said, no, this is terrible. Yeah. And it didn't matter. All the states adopted it. And he refused to sign off on it. Same with Sandra Stotsky, the English professor in Massachusetts. She was involved in bringing Massachusetts to the top also. She refused to sign off on the English standards. I was with these people. We were communicating, and they were looking at it every step of the way. And, I was even invited by the Department of Education in New Hampshire to go review the Common Core. And so what I did is I took their standards that they had given me, and I went and looked at it, and I went side by side, marked off the problems with the Common Core in New Hampshire, but it didn't matter. They still adopted it because here's some money, race to the top money. If you take these standards, even Massachusetts, they abandoned the best standards in the country for Common Core. So after that, you're having a problem with math back in the 90s. You adopt Common Core. Common Core for some states was actually probably a little bit of a step up, but for states like Massachusetts, it was a major step down.
Right.
You kind of went from, you weren't really elevating education, you were doing this. And so the problems with Common Core math we saw that in fuzzy math too. So you have to go back years and years and years before that. Some schools, back then it was state by state before Common Core, because Common Core is national. So before that, we had state standards. So each state, so if you were brought up in a state that had good standards like Massachusetts, you were getting good math. And if you were in a state where they didn't have good standards, then you were probably getting fuzzy math. And what happens is parents then hire tutors. And so and I highly recommend that. Don't rely on what your kids are getting, because you're never going to prepare your kids for higher level math using Common Core. It's just that bad.
So you're saying get tutors for your kids.
You need tutors if your kids are in a public school with using Common Core math.
Now that's the problem, because now you're putting, again, another financial burden on parents when it shouldn't have to be that way.
Right.
And like my son was born in 2006, so by 2010, he was just getting into the system.
Yep.
2011, 12, he's coming home. I can't help him.
No.
One of the the greatest indicators of a child's success is the affluence of the family. I wasn't a very affluent guy, but I cared, and I live in a nice town, and I tried to help him every night. I was unable to help him with his Common Core math.
Which tells you this is wrong. Yeah. If you can't help your own child, you are using a math program that should be thrown in the trash and get a basic Saxon math is a good math textbook. You have to go back to pre-Common Core. I've looked at them. I've used them. I've used some of them on my kids. I've used them to help other kids. I've recommended these to other parents because the mathematicians, again, this is not something that I came up with. These are the guys who would go through each math book and they would find, here's a good one, Ann Marie. Here's for algebra, anything written by Mary Dolciani would be considered a good algebra book. So I knew that if she was the author of any algebra book, I could trust that. Right. They would kind of inform us, anybody who was on this group together, of what was good and what wasn't. But they're kicking our butt. The other countries are kicking our butt, and it's basic math. We're not talking about rocket science in colleges. You're talking about just basic math. And if you don't get that foundation, K through 8, forget it in high school. And it's sad, but you're putting hurdles in their way. I
went to the Azores in April, I think it was. Part of a Portuguese club.
He's a cymbal player in their band.
I am. I'm a cymbal player in a Portuguese. I don't have any Portuguese
dance,
blood, but I'm a
dance.
cymbal player.
No, I'm just kidding.
So I went to, and there was a gentleman from Texas whose wife was from the Azores, and he moved there, and he actually opened a restaurant called the Texan. Plug for. And he said that when he moved there, he had 3 sons, and they were doing okay in Texas school systems. They moved to the Azores and they excelled. And I said, oh, so then they spoke Portuguese. He said, no, they didn't speak a word of Portuguese when they moved there, but they got there and they excelled. I said, how is that possible? He said, it's just the way that they teach and the system that they use.
And it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. Common Core math, for instance, is very language heavy. So like when it first came out, the tests first came out, explain why 2 + 2 = 4. Well, you're asking a little child to explain something that, they might not have the language skills. If you're talking about anybody who's in English as their second language, you've put them automatically at a disadvantage completely. Sure. This is why I tell, like I told the mayor in Manchester, your kids are at a major disadvantage because you have a lot of kids who speak different languages.
Yeah, we have that here too.
They can be brilliant in math, though. They can be brilliant. Yeah. If you look at Russian math, like Russian math programs, there's hardly no language in it. You're learning math. Numbers. You're not learning to communicate. You're learning math. So right when that came out, there's a professor out at Johns Hopkins. I had contacted him and I said, what does this look like? And he wrote an article for Fordham, and he said basically, this is too much of a focus on communication skills and not a focus on computation skills. So there's where some of your problems are coming in. And, they'll say, well, we have to do this because this is how it's going to be tested. So they've kind of got your school like, okay, if your kid can't communicate why 2 + 2 = 4, so now your school's so focused on the communication part that they're failing these kids on learning basic math. They might be scoring high in the school because they can communicate if it's a highly affluent area.
Is that where the whole 2 + 2 could = 5? If you could explain how you got there?
You could explain. I don't think so. I don't think you'd probably get that right. But you can see where that really puts some schools and some areas at a disadvantage. And it's not because they don't know math. It's because they can't communicate. And there's no reason to it. The mathematicians that I talked to, we were looking at I had one of the mathematicians that did a whole presentation on Russian math and how they teach. And do you remember the sticks in a bundle when you were learning math? Yeah, sure. He shows that that's how they learn it in Russia. And you can see it. When I would help kids, and even my own kids on math, I would just get out the flashcards. But we didn't just do a flashcard and put it down. We would have to say it out loud. Sure. So now you're hearing it and now you're seeing it. And so, and then we would get, okay, now you know all these, but these you're really struggling with. There's tricks. Put one up on the mirror in the bathroom. So every day when they go in there, they see it. There's things that you can do that's very simple, but they've made it so difficult. Yes. Yes.
Overcomplicated.
Overcomplicated.
We have a large, population of ESO, which is, that's great to have a community like that. But to your point, when we overcomplicate it, and a kid is looking at a paper that is y is 2 plus 2 equal blank, show your work. It's overwhelming, right?
Yes, it is overwhelming.
But when you have right, and you have that, and they can see it and do it. Okay, now I know it. I can write it down. Right, done. Problem solved.
Yep. And there's no good reason for it.
No.
When I'm talking to these mathematicians in some of our top universities, this is not my opinion. This is their opinion. I did it for years. I communicated with them for years. When they're pointing this out, and they have analyzed how the Chinese learn, how the Japanese learn, these top countries, and they have looked at their programs and compared it to ours. That's how we got better math programs and standards in Massachusetts. Wilfred Schmidt from Harvard worked on the Massachusetts academic standards. So, you don't complicate it. You don't make math harder than it has to be.
That was exactly what Andrew said when we first got on the school committee. We were talking about the state rankings of towns. And Barrington consistently comes out number one. And his first question was, has anybody gone to Barrington and find out what they're doing different than what we're doing?
Right, what are they doing differently than what we are?
Well, that's because they don't like talking about rankings. That's what we found out.
You do need to also check if those parents are getting their kids outside tutoring, because that doesn't always show up.
And it's the affluence.
Yeah.
But that could be that could be the answer to the question, right?
Speaking the language.
Has anybody gone there and talked to them?
Yeah.
We're getting our kids are getting tutored.
There are challenges Cumberland has that Barrington doesn't. MLS, affluence, where they're one of the most affluent communities in the state. But there are other things that they're probably doing a lot better than we are that we can glean off, even if we don't skyrocket our rankings, just to gradually climb, as long as we're on an
uphill climb.
Yeah, uphill trajectory.
I mean, luckily our sports are far more superior than theirs, so that we have that.
And the same is true for the English, like English language arts.
Okay.
They screwed that up too.
Was it ESL or something?
Yeah, I mean, I read an article the other day where kids are coming to college and they've never read an entire book in high school. They were never assigned. And I'm looking at you guys and I'm thinking, I'm sure you guys were probably assigned, you're going to have to read a book. Okay, you're going to have to read a book and you're going to have to write a report.
Yep.
They
didn't have
Common
ChatGPT then.
Yeah, they read this excerpt. Read this excerpt. It's not read a book anymore. And and then it's workforce development. So we've shifted away from academics to workforce development. So now it's like read a technical advisory or read something that's, more work related versus a novel.
So they're creating employees.
Yes, worker bees. And so what happens a lot of times, I had a teacher one time tell me that her daughter got into Northeastern, and I said, how that's a tough one. How'd you do it? And she was an avid reader of great works of literature. And this is what they focused on in Massachusetts because Sandra Stotsky led them. And the vocabulary words, you're introduced to new vocabulary words. So when she had to write her essay to get into Northeastern, she could draw upon all that she learned by reading. These are the kinds of things that a lot of parents don't know. So they're not saying to the school, hey, why is it you haven't assigned my kids any books to read, any great works of literature to read? Because sometimes there's great messages in it. These are they stand the test of time for a reason. You learn things, you learn about life, you learn about hopefully learn good characteristics, but you're also learning, where the grammar, but now they're assigning garbage. Right. If they are assigning a book, I had a student who was in honors English in New Hampshire, was assigned the book by Ibram X. Kendi. Do you know who he is?
Oh yeah, I've heard of him.
Okay. Yeah. So he's critical race theory guru. Yeah. And he wrote a book, it's called Stamped. And I read it because I wanted to see what she had a problem with it. It's written like on a 5th grade reading level. And he says, I'm not a historian. I'm like, well, why are you writing about history then? Because some of the things you got wrong. So this was in a honors English class. They pulled her out of that school. Honors? They pulled her out. Sure. So, some parents are catching it and they're doing something about it, but why is it in an honors English that was chosen for those
Yeah,
students?
where's the Shakespeare? Where's the
Exactly.
Tolkien?
It's
You know?
because of
Yes.
the critical race theory. They get more money or something. I don't know. They get something, some
It's
benefit.
the fad of the
Social-
day. It was
yeah,
the
exactly.
fad of the day.
The
I can
social
remember
agenda.
Social
back when
agenda,
I was in,
yeah.
when I was in high school. It was an older book, so it had been around for a while. But the biggest risque book we read was like Catcher in the Rye. You know,
Well, they don't even like that book in the school anymore, do they?
Probably not.
that was it. And I read it, and I was like, this is a great literary. I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm sure it had a lot of lessons and things like that in it that I was just missing because I was a grunt. But I was like, this was.
When Jay went to school, they used abacus for math.
It's not very funny.
I know. Anyway, there I go, derailing it. So, but this is why this is one of the reasons why they've started focusing more on the mental health than they have on the academics.
Right.
And that's why you've I don't know if you've coined it or not, or the phrase of us having like the public school system being the biggest mental health clinics in the U.S.
Yeah. And it's up to parents to push back, because what we do, or what I advise parents to do, is get to the school board meetings, start pushing back and telling them, I don't care what you want. This is what we want for our kids. Stop with all of this. And, and we bring in the proficiency scores and we say, focus on this. And you really have to do that. And parents just have to get off the couch and start going to these school board meetings. And, I work with school board members around the state, not enough. Too many are just caught up in the, whatever you want, we're going to give you whatever you want.
Yep.
But if you start pushing back, sometimes they do listen. They're only gonna do things if you're not saying anything, and they're just gonna walk all over this. But it's really important to know that No Child Left Behind was focused on academics, and now they're focused on the culture of the school. Now you understand what's going on.
We had an issue here where we went over infrastructure, and I mean I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but we went over infrastructure, and I was talking about the fact that there are going to be students that are going to move to other schools. Some of the schools in Cumberland score better than other schools. We got an influx over 2 meetings of teachers and administrators that were just attacking me for saying that scores don't matter. And I'm like, to me, growing up, in school in the 80s and 90s, that's the only thing that mattered. And it seems like during the meetings, we go over the scores three times a year in meetings. But, there was a line of probably 70 teachers and administrators that came in. And
Over 2 meetings.
Over 2 meetings
Wow.
they used the public comment and to basically insult me. A lot of them were just insulting.
Oh yeah.
About my classes, that I have a step foot in the, in this school, which is literally 3-4 miles, 5 miles away.
And you had nothing between your ears.
Yeah, hot air, nothing but hot air between my ears, and all because I just not question. I just mentioned the fact, I didn't mention anything about the students, anything about the teachers, but
the school, really. Like you didn't say anything about it.
It was just shocking to me that they mobilized these people, but yet when we tried to get them to mobilize the unfair treatment of a teacher or
Budget season.
Budget season. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
What do you guys need? We want to hear from you.
Yep.
Yeah, they're good.
Nobody
So they get
showed up.
over the last 2 years, there's a step 10 and above and step 10 and below. Step 10 and above this year is getting a 3% raise. Step 9 and below is getting a 1% raise. The first meeting that after we got elected that Andrew and I went to, the school committee voted in the superintendent a 10% plus raise.
Oh, that's
yeah.
insane.
A 10%
Wow.
plus raise for
Yeah.
the superintendent. And one of the committee members voted against it because he says in our collective bargaining agreement we only put in a 1% raise for the step 9 and below. I cannot in good conscience, and he was a teacher in Massachusetts. He said I cannot in good conscience vote for a 10% plus
Right.
raise for the superintendent, and there was nobody at that meeting. Right, then we go into budget season. I figure, oh man, they're going to have to be upset about a 1% raise. There was nobody in those budget meetings. There was 70 people that came to yell at me about mentioning the scores of a school.
But they were afraid.
But for their own salary, not a single person showed up. Not one.
They're afraid to show up though, because if they did, retaliation.
And again, I have to say this because I've been criticized by other members of the committee, and maybe rightfully so, for speaking what they consider is on behalf of the rest of the committee. And my opinions are my own opinions. I am a single member of the school committee and a citizen and resident of the town of Cumberland, and I will say with 100% certainty that I believe that there is retaliation happening against teachers who speak out in the Cumberland school system. Absolutely. 100% believe that.
And you see that in New Hampshire?
Oh, for sure. I can't get teachers. I get anonymous emails.
I can pull up 100 anonymous Facebook messages or emails that nobody wants to use anyway.
Yes, they don't want to use their name. They're inside the school, and sometimes they'll tell me their name because they, I don't ever share a name. I don't share a name with anybody. But the retaliation is very real, and so I'm very sympathetic to that. And I do think if you're sitting on the school board, you should visit the school. You should talk to the teachers. You should try to form some kind of a relationship with some of them. Because quite frankly, to be honest with you, a lot of the teachers are forced into the garbage that they have to spread out, as manure, as I refer to it as. So a lot of times, I don't necessarily blame teachers. Now, I don't think the unions have been very helpful. They haven't been helpful. But the teachers themselves, most people go into teaching for the love of teaching kids. Yeah. So they really have a good heart. And so for the most part, now I can tell you that, I backlash for 20 years. I mean, I can't even tell you how many people, I've been subpoenaed. I've had all kinds of things, people coming after me, but I don't really care. I'm not stopping, and I'm not going to shut up, and I'm not going away. So, I speak the truth, and I try to do this, just factually. I'm not trying to be personal, but most of the time, I went to one meeting. I presented at a board meeting one time, and all the teachers got up there. What's she doing here? What's she doing here? Why is she here? Why is she here? And I got up and spoke, and somebody who had attended the meeting was like, Ann Marie, those teachers need you more than you need them. Right. Because you're explaining the problems that they have to face in the classroom. And I do feel like some of them probably changed their opinion because I wasn't there to slam them. Mm-hmm. I'd even suggested to the board members, go visit the classrooms, talk to these teachers. You're going to get a lot of good information from them. Don't assume that they agree with a lot of the garbage that they are, just think about it. Yeah. If you're a teacher, you have to feed children something and you just give them garbage to feed them and you're forcing them. Teaching methods is another thing. You should be looking at professional development. You should be looking at the grants that are coming in. They force these teachers in math. We don't want you to teach the kids the math. We want the kids to discover math. That's the dumbest thing that you're ever going to be told. When they tell you that, just know that person shouldn't be in education because that's a ticket to a tutor.
Jay, did you say something about the superintendent?
Don't get me protested again. About what now?
No, about kids in third grade taking the tests.
No, that was there was a anonymous tip that in order to improve the scores that don't matter. This is months after I was lambasted for talking about the scores, but in order to improve the scores that don't matter, they started to give the third grade students the fifth grade test, and they're going to give the third grade students on subject matter that they had not learned yet. I don't know. I forget.
I think it was science.
And then they're going to give the third grade students the fifth grade test again in fourth grade. On subject matter that they have not learned yet, just to get them familiar with the questions in the test so that when they take it in fifth grade, they'll get it better. So they're trying to artificially. And again, this was a anonymous tip that we got. And after, I gave it to The Wire, which is another news source in Cumberland on Facebook, and Caleb is the journalist for that. And I gave him the information I had. He did a lot more research. And it was sheer panic on the part of the people that brought it forward to us because my God, sheer panic, like actual fear. They whistle blew and they were terrified that they were going to get found out and fired for whistleblowing. And I don't know. I just gave you the information. I should have that put on the agenda to find out if that was actually the case. I never did.
Right.
I mean, it was right before the budget, like during the budget season and everything, and all this bus stuff. So it's been and I don't want to have to go to 6 meetings a month. So, but still, I mean, we should really follow up on that.
Right. But so kind of moving into, I know we've hit a lot of topics here. A lot about Common Core, the math, about the schools being the mental health institutes, but parental consent, it's dying. So walk us a little bit through how that is the case. Like, I know that they've got a lot of different mechanisms that they use to bypass parental consent.
Right. So it will depend on what you're referring to. If you're referring to
surveys,
okay,
check-in, behavioral screens.
Right. So you have a federal law, Every Student Succeeds Act, replace No Child Left Behind, and then you'll have state laws. Now, I don't know all of the details of the state laws, but I know in New Hampshire we have worked on consent legislation, and we've been very successful. For instance, if your child is taking a survey at school, non-academic, you need parental consent. There is an exception to the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which comes from the CDC. That one is notification. They just have to notify parents. We passed a law in New Hampshire this year, went through the House, went through the Senate, it's on the governor's desk, to include the YRBS in the consent, in the consent law. So you would have to look to see what your state law requires, but you should be consenting. This is an ethical principle. And it's shocking to me that the schools administer these surveys and they say, well, it's anonymous. It's anonymous, so we're not really tracking them. Oh, really? Because I have computer experts that have looked at this and said, those 3 questions will identify the student on that survey. I've had parents who've gone to the school and said, my child took the survey, find it and destroy it. And they have. Now, how did they find it and destroy it if their name's not on it? Yeah. Some of the kids write their names on it thinking it's a test. We have unique pupil identifier numbers. They're writing that on it sometimes. So that is a basic consent. Like, you should not be consenting to these surveys. Ever. First of all, if it's not a CDC, it's going to a private institute, private company.
But are parents being made aware of this? Like, I know you said that there's some state laws.
New Hampshire. Because
we require it, but that
you guys see that here in Rhode Island?
Yeah. Yeah, you need to check that.
Look into it.
Check into that, because that is an ethical, you're doing research on children.
Yeah.
When you're doing research on children, somebody needs to consent. And they will use the excuse of, it's anonymous. That's not a good excuse. It still should require parental consent. But for instance, any mental health assessments or treatment need parental consent also. And they're not doing it. They're not doing it in New Hampshire. Again, so I have caught this. A parent contacts me, my child went to see the school counselor. I'm like, did you consent? No. And I'm like, oh, well, that's against the law. That's in Every Student Succeeds Act. So that's in the federal law. It's under.
I printed that out today.
Yeah, it's in section 4002 of ESSA, requires parental consent. Now, here's the funny part. So
it requires written consent.
Written consent. Informed consent. So we were trying to put that in state law. This was last year. We had our senator that put it in, said that, if you're doing any mental health treatment in the classroom, you need parental consent. We had we have a social workers kind of organization. So all the social workers belong to this, and the head of that person came in to testify, and she said, we cannot pass this law. This will send shockwaves through all the social workers in the school. And I'm looking around going, it's already in federal law. What do you mean? And so I couldn't speak up because this was a public hearing to her, but I wrote her a letter like the next day and copied all the senators, copied all the representatives, copied our commissioner, copied everybody on there. And I said, did you hear what she said? And I brought up the video and said, if she's saying that this isn't happening, we have federal law, then they're already breaking the law.
Right.
So I brought this to their attention. These are things that parents don't always know about. Under Biden, he tried to get rid of parental consent when your child receives Medicare services at school. So they're billing Medicare, I think, or Medicaid. I'm sorry, I'm getting that confused now. I think it's I think it's Medicaid. So they're billing
one or the other.
Right, one or the other. So they're billing the government for that, and normally parents look at it, sign off on it, and then they bill for it. Biden wanted to get rid of parental consent on that, to streamline the process, of course. Well, I think that got shut down. I don't think that ever passed while he was in office. But these are the kinds of things that, parents need to be aware of what they're doing in the school medically or mental health wise. And really monitor that. Because we had 2 kids vaccinated 2 years ago against parental consent. The parents actually said, do not vaccinate my child. And they went to school and got vaccinated because they didn't read the permission slips.
And that's how they got around it.
They just gathered them all up, and they had written on there, do not vaccinate my child. They gathered them all up thinking that they were all consent forms and just vaccinated all of them. So if you're not paying attention.
So was there lawsuits?
Those 2 parents didn't do anything. I've got access to attorneys, and I'm like, guys, can we sue over this?
Seriously.
You need willing parents, which I do have some willing parents who have sued the schools in New Hampshire, but in that case, no, we didn't get anybody in that. And just to show you how far some of these schools are willing to go, this was back in the 90s in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. You can go back and read the articles. 6th grade girls were all gathered up one day, and they gave them gynecological exams in the school without parental notification or consent. 6th grade girls, and they were sued, and the parents did win, but they were traumatized. Yeah. So that's kind of, you had a doctor who was willing to do it. You had school officials willing to do it. That's how far it can go.
That's something that even a lawsuit can't fix what just happened to those girls, right? That carries with them for the rest of their lives.
Right. And we're getting school-based health clinics into schools now. That a lot of money was coming in from the feds under that. Hopefully that stopped.
Wow.
So we've got some up in Maine. I don't know if you have any in Rhode Island, but we have, I think, one in New Hampshire. So that's something to watch for. Consent, again, if you're not there.
So we're going to take a little break. We'll come back and we'll talk about the overreach on records, and then also trying to reclaim the authority. So try to give some parents, hey, this is what you can do. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Does that work with you?
Yep.
All right, we'll be back.
This episode is brought to you by the Cumberland Coalition for Small Business, committed to empowering local entrepreneurs with the tools and support they need to succeed. Whether you're launching a new venture or expanding an existing business, the Coalition offers access to resources, advocacy, and meaningful connections that drive real growth. Because strong small business builds stronger communities. Visit CumberlandCoalitionForSmallBusiness.com to learn more.
We're back.
Good.
Now. So we're back now, Bacon.
Yep. Perfect. I got that. Yep. I surmised that.
Just letting you know.
First time.
So when we, before we went out on the break, we were talking about a lot of stuff. Common Core, we were talking about the mental health facilities or factories, talking about parental rights and how we need to learn how to, or not learn, but parents need to consent. They need to be very aware of what's happening so that they can make sure that they're not being left out of the loop.
Yeah.
But what happens when parents say no and the school says, too bad?
That is a good question. We also, the Supreme Court just ruled on forcing kids to participate or read books that, violate their parents' conscience and things like that. So that was a big win for parents, that they need to understand that with that ruling, that has a lot of weight behind it. Now, in New Hampshire, we had passed a law. It took us several years that says that if a parent objects, any objectionable material cannot be basically forced on a child. You have to work with the parent and come up with an alternative. And it took us several years to get that passed. I mean, I'd testify on it, and back then we had a Democrat governor, and she would veto it. And finally, we got our former governor, Governor Sununu, signed it into law. These are the things that really can help parents. If you come look at our laws, and that's what we do. We copy laws. So we don't always sometimes come up with the language. We'll find out another state has this, and we just look at that. Now you have to have a good legislature. You have to have a governor who is friendly towards parental rights. That does help. But if I've got a pretty good legislature in that supports parental rights. We just passed a parental rights bill up in New Hampshire. So these are the kinds of things that when somebody's running for office, ask them questions. Do you support parental rights? What are you willing to do? And I don't know the political nature here, but some state laws in place can be really, really helpful. But even if you don't have those state laws, again, the Supreme Court just ruled on that. That's a big win. So if they're trying to force this stuff on your kids in school, you now have that ability to say, wait a second, we don't have to participate in this, and I'm going to pull my child out of school if this is what they're learning. You need to be in there. You need to be looking at the curriculum. You need to be looking at the syllabus. You need to be looking at what is being taught to your kids, and if it's objectionable, then refuse. I mean, I did that for my kids when I had my son, he was young in first grade, and they wanted to give him a dental exam at school. And I said, absolutely not. No, we take him to the dentist. Stayed home that day. Those are the kinds of things that, start exercising your rights as a parent. And, those are the kinds of things that you can do and take back some of the control from these schools. They are not the parent. I did not sign up for the school to become the parent or to co-parent with the school. This is your responsibility. And but some parents are like, oh, cool, the school's going to do it. I don't have to take my kid to the dentist. And then, they come to find out that, like in Maine, for instance, the dad, a girl came home, she's 17, she had a bag of pills and put it on the counter, and dad's like, what's this? And she's like, oh, well, they prescribed them at school. And he's like, well, what are they? And they're Zoloft. And so Zoloft is...
this happened in New Hampshire?
Yeah, no, this happened in Maine.
In Maine?
With the school-based health clinics.
What is Zoloft?
Wow.
So Zoloft can create...
it's like an SSRI.
Yeah, it's for mental health, so for anxiety or things like that, depression. And he didn't consent to that. And then he goes to the school and says, why did you give this to my daughter without my consent? And the school's, well, the school-based health clinic prescribed that to her. And federal dollars came in, and federal dollars say that we don't need parental consent. And so he took his daughter out of the school. Lo and behold, DCYF came and visited him.
Seriously?
So, yeah, because he took his daughter out of the school, DCYF came and visited him. Found him to be, perfectly, cleared him of everything. But this is where this can go. They gave her
You had a little example of that.
Who?
Oh.
You.
Oh, what are you talking about?
The Facebook thing.
Facebook thing? Yeah.
Like the school's monitoring Facebook.
Yeah, so...
Yes.
And they sent the police to his house because of a Facebook post he made.
Yeah, so and I've talked about this before in the past.
And we found out it was actually the
superintendent,
that called the police on him for a Facebook post.
So talking about consent and the teachers not being... So there was a policy that came from RIDE that if your child identified as something other than what they identify at home, the school didn't have to, or the teachers didn't have to tell the parents, or were discouraged and told that they couldn't tell the parents. Yep. And I found out about that, and I went on the community Facebook page and I said, if I find out that anybody is withholding this information from me, there'll be severe consequences. Consider this your warning. So there are a number of different paths that I was thinking of when I said there'll be severe consequences. And
Like legal.
legal,
Yeah.
legal, political.
Yep.
And now I have a show.
Or protest.
Protest.
Yep.
Now we have a show that we can
Yep.
put out there. But the superintendent of the school said, or somebody from the office took it as violence, and they sent a police officer to my house to ask me what are you so mad about?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to go too deep on here, but I had just dealt with some suicidal stuff from my kids over this kind of stuff, and it was very raw for me.
Yeah.
So that's why I did what I did. Anyway,
Right.
we just got off topic there, but
No, I mean, it's all on topic. You know what I mean? It's overreach, you know?
yeah.
And for the school to be monitoring social media, and I'm going to tell you, I use it against them.
Yeah.
You know, we're on a school committee. There was a exchange student who wanted to walk across the stage. She didn't meet the criteria. You know, the policy says she shouldn't have been able to walk across the stage. And I agree. She didn't meet the criteria. She shouldn't have been able to. But because of incompetent administration, she was told the entire time that she was going to walk across the stage, and they told her during the rehearsal the day before that you're not going to. She had changed her flight. She had bought a dress. She had all that stuff. And
She paid dues.
paid the dues.
Got her
cap and gown.
Got her
Yeah.
cap and gown.
Yeah.
They asked her how to spell how to say
how
her
to
name,
pronounce your
how to
name.
pronounce your name from wherever she walked.
So and I told the woman in an email, and I CC'd the chair of the school committee so that she's on, she knows what I'm telling these people, because it was an email to all of us. But we can't reply all because it's a rolling quorum, they call it, where, So I replied to her and I said, listen to me, the only way you're going to get any kind of action on this is to go on social media. And you have to, if you don't go on social media, they're going to bury this. They're going to apologize to you. They're going to stonewall you like they stonewall everybody. And she went on social media, and lo and behold, we had an emergency meeting.
Yep.
And in the emergency meeting, it was like a unanimous vote to let her walk across the stage. But now that there were secondary problems there with the kids that are going to summer school for one credit. In summer school is like a 95% graduation rate. Why can't they walk and just get an empty? So that's something we're going to look into and change. But I am a follow the policy guy.
Yep.
Right? I want to follow black and white, follow the policy, follow the regulations. The problem was they told her the day before.
Yeah.
But yeah, social media.
And she didn't even want her diploma.
No, she didn't want her diploma. She just wanted to walk.
She just
wanted to have the
experience.
experience.
Yeah.
But social media is a double-edged sword. It get you in trouble, and it can solve a lot of problems.
Well, you can see too from the one policy that basically says hide information from parents. When you have something like that in your school, what more evidence do you need to know that something is very wrong with the school that your child is attending? We took a case to the Supreme Court in New Hampshire this past couple of years. Parent contacted me and said, basically that her child was using a different name at school, and she had contacted the teachers. The teachers wouldn't give her information. Again, now the teachers weren't making this decision. They're following the policy that, for some strange reason, they thought it was a good policy. We sued. We did lose it at the lower court, and then we did lose it at the Supreme Court. But I think that so much is changing right now.
Well, I was going to ask you. I'd heard about that. And what did they end up telling you? Why did you lose?
They changed the policy mid lawsuit. So the first policy, they didn't win because I felt like, we had a pretty political judge.
Well, go ahead.
And then they changed the policy. They kind of changed the wording of the policy so it wasn't so harsh in terms of we suggest that you don't tell the parents or something. They kind of changed the wording a bit, and so we lost it at the Supreme Court level. But what's interesting is that parent is a teacher in another public school. So again, I try to tell people that a lot of these teachers are good people. They don't like what's going on in some of these schools either, and they're having to deal with it. And we lost that one. It was a tough loss.
I thought I had heard something or read something about they told you if you don't like it, you could just
Yes. So
take your
so
kids
the
out.
attorneys
That's what I was
the
referring.
attorneys for the Manchester school during the hearing, during the Supreme Court presentation, the attorney said, because they were asked by the Supreme Court justices, about, well, what is a parent supposed to do if they don't, if they don't like your policy, and they just leave the school. And you have so many people fighting against school choice, and I'm going, if you're fighting against school choice, shouldn't you make the schools a little more family friendly, where you're not driving them out of the school? I mean, because she immediately pulled her daughter out of that school, and sent her to a charter school. This is a great way to get rid of kids. I mean, their policies sometimes drive these kids out. And we had another case of where parents got those wristbands and wrote XX on the wristbands, and then went to the soccer game.
I saw that on your research.
So we went to the soccer game, and they were told to leave the soccer game. The administrator said, told the local police, take them out of the soccer game, kick them out of the soccer game.
You gotta explain what that was.
Right.
It was because they were
supporting girls only sports.
XX.
Yeah.
So XX on a wristband. That was it. They didn't get up. They weren't shouting. They weren't screaming. They weren't doing anything. They just wore the wristbands to their daughter's soccer game and were told to leave. And then they were also forbidden from going into the school activities, school events.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the next week we showed up. So there was probably 30 of us. So we got all this wristbands, and we showed up at the next game, just waiting to see if they were going to kick us out. And they didn't, because they said, well, the trans student that was on the other team wasn't at that game, so they were going to let us wear them. But we took that to the courts, and we did lose that one, but that one is now going to the Supreme Court. Because where is freedom of speech?
Yeah.
I mean, so what happens if you bring, if you wear a T-shirt with a pride flag on it? Doesn't that offend lots of Christian students? I mean, where does it end?
There was a kid who got suspended from school for wearing a shirt that, what did it say? I think it just said...
Yeah, two genders. There are two genders.
I think it was that, or I thought it said MAGA on it, and he got extended.
In Cumberland? Or?
No. This is not in Cumberland.
It's
I'm just saying.
Case,
it was a national case. He had this shirt on, and they expelled him for it.
Yeah. So, and there, what has tended, from my research is, if you have a policy in place that guides what you can wear, as long as they're following the policy, it's normally okay. You can't just say, well, we're going to pick and choose. So in that case, I thought it said something, there are two genders.
Maybe it did.
And they said you can't wear that, but they, you can wear anything else to school. So why can't you wear that to school?
Yep.
But a lot of times it boils down to your judges. I've learned that.
Wow. It was a thing in Cumberland, in our town, that I want to say about 7-8 years ago. They did a anti-2A protest and gun control. And all the students had shirts and they had stickers that had an AR-15 with a circle around it and a cross through it. Mm-hmm. Well, the policy says you cannot have any kind of propaganda or any kind of shirts that have a depiction of a firearm. So the dean of students at the time went around and collected them all up, and they were like, no, but wait, you don't understand. We're against it. And he was like, he's like, it doesn't matter. It has a picture of a gun on it. And they were incensed by that. The rules won't apply to us.
But that was the right thing to do, though.
It was the right thing to do.
That was the right thing to do.
Because you're following policy. Yeah. If you want to challenge the policy in court, challenge the policy in court. Yeah. But you don't just, defy the policy. Yeah.
But they do that. But they're doing that all over the nation, though, with the whole Title IX thing, right? We just had a conversation about that, or we talked a little bit about it. But what they ended up doing didn't really matter because of the transgender policy, right? So how did that work?
So the Title IX was from a ruling in Kentucky where a judge made a ruling, and Trump had a Title IX policy, then Biden had his Title IX policy, and then Trump reverted back to the original Title IX policy because of the ruling in Kentucky, which basically took away protections from gender identity.
Sure.
And our Title IX policy in Cumberland doesn't have any teeth, really. It's just the policy about the transgender policy that says, men are allowed in, biological men are allowed in women's sports, or biological men are allowed in women's locker rooms.
Yep.
That is the policy that really, if that was changed, which it should be now, because the Title IX policy takes the protections away from gender orientation, and it says that women have the right against discrimination, and having a man on a women's sports team is basically discrimination against women, the biological man. That needs to be changed in order to fully realize what the change in the Title IX policy is supposed to represent.
And is that something they're going to do, though? Or are they going to work?
It's supposed to go on the agenda.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's not something they want on the agenda, so it's going to take a while.
But that's, the whole point that I was making is that you could have federal laws till you're blue in the face, unless the states are not.
Even the towns.
Well, they'll lose funding. The federal government will not fund your state, your schools. So that's the power of the purse. So they're going to have to do that if they don't want to lose funding. And, all this uproar over, how can the federal government do that? Well, the federal government did it just this last administration. Yeah. You had to do it this way or you would lose federal funding. It's just that they all went along with it and they didn't care. Right. Now, all of a sudden, they don't like this part of the agenda. And I just kind of want to, touch on that real quick in terms of what this did to girls, because we fought this in New Hampshire. We've been fighting it for a few years. And so there's girls that, had to deal with this, whether it be playing in the sport or whether it be in a locker room. And that is, both of those are very difficult for a girl to deal with. But when you're talking about in a locker room, that is extremely uncomfortable for many of these girls. And so some of the girls would go to the administration of one of the school in particular, I'm thinking of Kearsarge in New Hampshire, and complain about it, and they were punished. And these are the kinds of things that were unfolding. So the girls learned to shut up, don't say anything, live with it. And this is the kind of atmosphere and the culture that you have created in your school, where girls who are uncomfortable sharing a locker room with a biological boy now learns, deal with your discomfort and shut your freaking mouth or we're going to punish you. Yeah. That was the outcome. And I think that for some people it's like, oh, we want to be inclusive, but you're not understanding what this did to the girls in this school in particular. And these are the kinds of things that they can't even talk about it. If they go into the school board and they talk about it, for instance, I have a friend who is suing the Kearsarge school right now because she went and spoke at a school board meeting, and she mentioned that the player was a biological male, and I can't remember exactly the terminology she used in her discussion, but they shut her down. They told her she couldn't speak. Well, now she's suing the school. So now she just filed a lawsuit against the school because, you're not going to shut us up. No. We are women, we are girls, and we're not shutting up and we're not going away. And it doesn't matter. I'm very grateful that the Trump administration has taken this issue and changed the trajectory of where it was going. Without a doubt, this is a big improvement for all of us. But the people I don't think were really realizing, because people weren't always speaking up. This is why they weren't speaking up. I met with those parents who had those daughters in that school. I went to their school board meeting and spoke on their behalf. Those are the kinds of things that I do. And so when I heard from them, I was just distraught. I thought, this is what this has come to, where girls can't speak because they're uncomfortable with the biological boy coming through the locker room with them. That's insane.
So talk about inclusivity.
Yes. We went backwards. Yeah. What's Title IX? What good is Title IX if you're just going to, if you've read the language, that this is not what Title IX was set up to do. It was set up to give these girls opportunities. Yeah. Yep. And finally we get them opportunities, and now you're going to set us back and let them play on the sports. And maybe the biological boy doesn't win, but you know what? He took a place. He took somebody's place on that team. Yep. And he's in the locker room, And it's extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them, because I just would never have let my daughter in that locker room. There's just no way. But
So-
that's a fallout.
But the more people not speaking out on the Title IX thing, on the biological males in the locker rooms, because they're afraid of retaliation. We just had an email from a parent that had nothing to do with Title IX. It was, she went and spoke out against the school budget, and then her son, who had not ever been in trouble in 14 years in school, literally 3 days later got a detention for something that they still have not actually.
Oh, how
actually,
convenient.
yeah. And
Retaliation.
Yeah. And and now it's a case where that's going through it hasn't reached the school committee yet.
This is why I do what I do a lot of times, is because those parents can't always get involved. So a lot of times I'll speak on their behalf, or I'll go to a school board meeting, or I'll make that statement, because if they find out who's speaking up, they're going to get retaliated against. I do it all the time.
So I have 2 kids in the school system here in Cumberland, and I wonder all the time what's happening at school with my kids, because I'm very vocal. I'm very public here. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just waiting for the day that one of them come home and say, "Hey, this happened at school. I didn't do it," and someone's just retaliating. I hope that doesn't happen. I know my wife; she's always telling me, "I don't trust you being in that situation, being here, because you never know what they're going to do to the kids." I mean, it is.
It's a very real concern.
About it.
It's a very real concern. Unfortunately, it's disgusting that that in small town Cumberland you have to worry about that. And there's no voice here. I mean, we're a voice, but I mean, Facebook, and that's what I tell people. I can show you my emails on the school committee. And I think I included you on a couple, because he's the at-large candidate. So everybody that emails the school committee, he's their rep. I get the emails when I'm the District 5. I'm one section of Cumberland. Yep. He gets them. So when he's on the email, I respond to them. What do I respond? You will get no satisfaction. You'll get no redress from the school committee. You need to go public and make this a public issue before you get any kind of action. And the people that do, they get a better result than the people that say, "No, I'm going to go through the administration."
Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, unfortunately, retaliation is a thing. And that's what a lot of majority of the people are afraid of. Whether it's their job or their kids or whoever it may be, retaliation is a thing, and it's awful.
You did the story about the lawsuit. There's 2 lawsuits against Cumberland for whistleblower retaliation against teachers. One of them was her ineffective Spanish class that they didn't do anything about, and a teacher, because her daughter was in it, a teacher spoke up, and they did an illegal search and seizure on her daughter. And the policy says that they'll do everything they can to inform the parents. She was a teacher in the school, and they didn't. They brought her in and interrogated her and looked through her phone.
Wow.
And then reprimanded her.
Oh yeah, reprimanded the teacher. But there's a lot I can't talk about that happens in executive session. This is a case. You can go on right now and read the case. The other case is the case about the teacher who went to their union.
Yep.
Cumberland, we have a 27 student max in the classrooms. They're allowed to go to 29. They're never allowed to go over 29. But from 27 to 29, they have to pay the teachers extra money. There are certain cases where they went to 32, in some cases, students. And this teacher went and she reported it to the union. Hey, they broke the union contract. They fired her.
Wow.
So now she's got a lawsuit.
They told her, well, in the lawsuit, it said that they told her to manipulate the records.
They said the principal. She said the principal was manipulating the records.
Yeah, so the principal, right? Yes, told her to manipulate the records to show that there wasn't that many.
Yeah. This is your tax dollars at work. Yeah. This is why people just sit home and don't do anything. And I'm like, you don't care how your tax dollars are spent. You don't care about the corruption. I mean, that's corruption.
Yeah. So I mean, that moves us right into reclaiming the authority. Like, can parents still win?
Yeah. I believe that when you use your voice, it's well worth it. But I do understand the parents that don't want to do it. But my advice always is go to your school board during a public meeting and speak up. Shine a light on it. And if something does retaliate, go back and shine a light again on the retaliation. Keep shining the light on. Now, it's easy for me to say, some people don't want to deal with something like that. But quite frankly, I think shining a light on it is the best thing that you can do, because they are a little more reluctant to do things. Sometimes they don't want you to come in and say, oh, by the way, because they know I'm coming in. If they do anything, guess what? I'm going to be in that next school board meeting and I'm going to be speaking up.
Jay tells me every time that camera comes in there, the school committee is on their best behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Changes
exactly.
It. Changes. So we have a camera in every regular public meeting. We have a camera. We have no camera in any other meeting. When his camera comes in, a policies and procedures meeting or any other kind of meeting, it's like, whoa, and everything, things just go differently.
Exactly. Shine a light on it. The sunshine is your best defense.
Yeah, that's why I'm afraid my kids are going to get retaliated against. But I mean, I can't be quiet, though. That's me.
How I am.
I can't be quiet. And if they do, well, it's another story. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I do think you should be polite. I think you should be professional. I don't think anybody should go in there screaming and yelling and arguing, because, first of all, that's ammunition for them to use against you anyway. So you're better off going in there as professional and as polite as you can be. And just use facts. One of the best presentations I've ever seen from a parent to the school board came from an attorney that I know, and I watched him do a presentation to the school board. This is actually the parent of the student who got the honors English, got that stamped book assigned to his daughter. But he went in and he presented it like a lawyer. And I watched and I thought, he's using facts, he's using information, he's got a suit on. Okay, you might not have to wear a suit, but, he was professional, and, what were they going to say? I mean, he just presented a case like he is an attorney, and he is an attorney. So if you can do it like that, because a lot of times school board members don't know what's going on. I've gone into school board meetings where they didn't know what was going on. I didn't know them. I go in, I tell them what's going on, and they were like, not everybody, a lot of them are like, get out. But some of them are like, who's she? I need to contact her. And they were thrilled that I came in and presented the information because they had no idea. And so those are the kinds of things that you have to, and keep in mind, superintendents don't want you there.
Sure.
They don't want you exposing any of this stuff. So the best thing you can do is go expose it in a professional way, in a kind way, and just say, here's what I'm, presenting to you, just so you know. And I do it all the time because they're not sharing this information with school board members. They're not telling you what's the flaws in Common Core.
You don't have to tell me that. Holy shit.
They're not going to tell you what are the flaws in Common Core math. I can give you a sheet from Dr. James Milgram who lines out every single thing. Do you think that any superintendent has given that to their school board members?
Probably
Yet
not.
I can pull it up and send it to the school board members and say, guess what? They're teaching Algebra 1 in 9th grade. Singapore students are learning it in 7th grade. Your kids are 2 years behind Singapore students by the time they get to 9th grade. This is how bad it is. And, and they don't even, all the standards in Algebra 2 aren't even in there. They don't even have it.
My focus is right now on, student safety. Because, I'd love to get to the curriculum, but, student safety is like, we're even failing at that. And one of the things that Andrew brought up in one of the meetings was we do the bullying report in executive session. Why are we don't use any names.
I didn't request it in executive session.
Yes.
I wanted it in an open meeting.
Should be, yes.
They're putting it in executive session, and I don't understand that because we're not I'm not requesting names. I just want a report.
Isn't that a violation of one of your state laws? Because that would be a violation of one of our RSA 91A in New Hampshire.
So the way that they put it in executive is they say that it's sensitive information, and they're gonna discuss actual people, and they're gonna discuss names of minors, and they can't put it in. But we've done it a couple of times so far in executive. They've never used a single name. So
now this is the hypocrisy in all of this. So my guess is they're using a computer program, and they're putting all of this information into your computer program, and that's going to a private company. So they don't have any problem sharing personally identified information on a student to a company. And if I'm sure you recall that what's the company, the big data company that just had the breach in the schools? Off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember. If you read the policies, every software program that goes into your child's Chromebooks, every one, they're not private. That information is not private. So all of that information is going to these private companies where they're gathering up all this information on the students, and they can share it. And they'll say, oh, it's FERPA protected, but they won't tell you that FERPA has a loophole that they can share it. But here they're gonna say, oh, we can't talk about this in a public meeting, where they should be talking about it, unless it has to do with a specific student. But they will give metadata to all of these private companies that is on their Chromebooks. And if you recall, I told you about the math program includes social emotional learning in it. That means that your math vendor, your Eureka math vendor, is also collecting behavioral information on your kids.
Wow.
And all of that information, where's that going?
Right.
Because we found out that it's going, we don't know where it's going. And it's being sold and it's being given away. And we had a big data breach not too long ago. And prior to that, the same company is being sued right now by parents for selling the data. Yeah. So all of that information on the Chromebooks, they're just giving that stuff away.
So Jay, you made a motion in one of the school committee meetings to review executive session items. Not anything specifically, just you made a motion to review executive.
As a school committee member, we get training, like all members of a public body. Council, school committee, fire, unsealed.
I'm sorry. What did I say?
So we have executive session, and in my opinion, we do more in executive session than we need to do. We overuse the reasons to go into executive session. And in one of the trainings I was at with the chair and 3 other members of the school committee, and then there were 2 different trainings. I went to one. It was the same. Presentation. The special assistant attorney general, who handles OPM and ARPA,
OMA,
and ARPA. He basically said that there are certain conditions that have to be met for something to be heard in executive session. Once those conditions expire, you need to unseal. He didn't say need. He said you should unseal the executive session minutes. It's on a video on my computer right now.
For the sake of transparency.
Yeah, I saw it.
For the sake of transparency, he said that the Office of the Attorney General of Rhode Island errs on the side of transparency. So you should unseal these. I made a motion in our school committee to unseal all of the executive session minutes that do no longer meet the requirement to remain sealed under the reason that they were sealed in the first place, or in executive session in the first place. 5-2 against.
So you didn't
5-2 against.
So you didn't make a motion to unseal. You made a motion to review
and then unseal
to see if things could be unsealed,
and even redact where needed to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they 5-2 against.
Can't the Attorney General do something
No.
in that situation?
No. So I reached out to the Attorney General because one of the comments that was made during the open portion of the meeting, the lawyer there. He said executive session means, and I'm quoting exactly what he said because I have it. I wrote an article about it. He said executive session meetings that are sealed are not public record, obviously under APRA. That's period. And then he told the committee it's different from a sewer commission than it is from a school committee. So you were saying, I wrote a letter to or an email to the Assistant Attorney General and said, hey, what do you say about this?
Yeah, because they did the milk toast thing. We let them do whatever they want.
Because he said in that video you were talking about, he said, in the interest of transparency, and I pulled it exactly from the video, in the interest of transparency, we encourage public bodies to review and unseal executive session meetings or portions thereof when the need for confidentiality is no longer acceptable. However, nothing in either of the APRA or OM compels a body or public body to do so. That's what he sent back to me in the.
So and here's
email.
the issue, right? So I told you my son, there was an investigation they did, and they did it in an executive session for my son who was knocked out, and then was transported to the hospital. That investigation was 250 something pages, and a lot of it was screenshots of different text messages and stuff. I am the kid's father. I cannot get a copy of that investigation unless I sue the school and I get it under discovery. That's the only way. So I mean, they're basically forcing my hand if I want a copy of that investigation.
Yeah.
You know, and I think last time I checked, I have like 125 days left before the statute of limitations expires.
Yeah, you have to sue. I had a school board member tell me, Ann Marie, nothing's going to change until parents start suing the school.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that sad? I mean, that's just sad.
So, Bacon, as school committee member, do you know what you need to do at this point? Like, is there any advice you can give to them?
Speaking of the survey, when you said that you can be, this is something that Andrew did that I thought was a master stroke, right? There is a toxic environment in the Cumberland school system, no doubt in my mind, and I only speak by myself, not for the school committee, disclaimer again. There is a toxic environment. He wanted to have a mailed out survey, that anonymous survey, because we were afraid, exactly what you said, that teachers are not filling out the surveys because they're afraid to be identified. And of course, in the meeting, the school committee meeting where we also voted on the survey, and the vote came with no money. It was a vote for us to continue to research a survey, and they voted it down 5-2. Again, they voted it down because they said that there was a survey that already covered, like, toxic work environment and discrimination and things like that, which I asked for the questions that they asked the teachers from the assistant superintendent. I've never gotten them. But yeah, so Andrew made that motion, was on the agenda, and they voted it down 5-2, even just to continue the research. But our contention was, that teachers are not filling them out because they're afraid that you can identify them from an IP address or wherever they come from.
Absolutely. Yep, they're afraid. That's you can also survey parents. I've seen some school boards do that, which I think is really helpful. Gives you good, honest feedback when they can just do it anonymously. Exit interviews. Why is a family leaving a school? Why is the teacher leaving the school? Why aren't you guys, asking these teachers, please come to us. We want to hear from you. That kind of thing. They don't want to know. Nobody wants to know because nobody wants to fix it.
Right.
Nobody wants to fix it. And so this is what you're paying for. This is what your kids are part of. This is the learning environment. And it could be so much better. Yeah. But, it's the status quo. We're just going to keep the status quo. We're going to protect the corrupt. We're going to just ignore it. We're not going to do anything about it. And it's just too bad,
Protecting the corrupt comes with a cost.
There's a provision in every Student Succeeds Act of parental engagement. You should look at that and read that and discover what the federal government requires you guys to do in terms of parent engagement. You should be engaging the parent. The parent should be engaged in the school. What are you doing to fulfill the requirements of ESSA when it comes to parent engagement? Yeah. That's another thing to look at.
So that, it's going to go into what are some best actionable, what have you done that works that parents can actually
rally parents to go speak out at public comments, right? Public meetings.
Yeah.
Get involved.
More parents need to speak up. Focus on academics and start complaining about the other stuff. The other stuff is not going to help your kids.
So we've been rallying these, here, we almost every single time we talk about something at the town council or something within the school committee, we try to rally and get them, but people just don't. Just don't go. So the
squeakiest wheel gets the most attention. So you don't even have to have, you don't have to have 50 people. If you have 5 people, if you have 5 to 10 people, that's really enough. And really just keep going and keep barking because you're in their ear. And if nobody else is speaking up, I have seen some good progress. But I got to tell you, I lose more than I win. To be honest with you, I lose
I
more
know,
than
we
I
know
win.
what that's like.
Andrew and I too. We had a big win, and then a week later we had a big loss.
Yeah.
They turned it right around.
Yeah, but when
That's
you
what I
win,
don't
doesn't it feel
understand.
good?
How
It
can they
feels
do
so
that,
good.
though?
They did. It felt great.
Yeah.
I don't understand how they can do that. Like, I was
They
there,
can do
I
that because
covered
they don't care about the rules, and they do whatever the hell they want.
Like,
That's
if you-
how they can do it.
like, they
They
voted
come
on
back and-
something.
Yeah.
But you guys are on the board now.
These two
First
are.
of all, you need to be looking for replacements. You need a majority, because if you got a majority, now you can start getting more things done. But still, starting with 2 is better than having none. So start looking for alternatives and get the school board, focused on academics. It's not about I want a majority because I want to rule the school. I want a majority so we can make positive changes. It's got to be positive. Parents don't always want to just hear the negative, negative, negative. I want to focus on academics. Can you help your kids with math? If you can't help your kids with math at home, then maybe we need to look at a program where you can understand it. How will you expect a child to understand this?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. It's
So
gotta be positive.
we're fighting the fact that our school committee for a while has just basically done what the superintendent and the lawyer wants them to do, wherever they.
Then why even have a school board? Why even have a school board?
I'll tell you. So I told you about the bullying. I wrote it down here somewhere. I didn't write it down. I screenshot it. So about the bullying there was the bullying in North Cumberland. A middle school, and yeah, that was an accident. Don't protest me. And I wrote about it was there was a bullying incident in a certain school, and I wrote back that that's not surprising. That a student was bullied in that school. They bullied the teachers in that school, and the superintendent was like, "Do you have any proof? Do you have any proof?" So I wrote to him. I said, if you would like a school committee subcommittee to look, to help look into instances of these bullying issues, I would 100% love to be on it. And he wrote back, "Hearing this request reminds me of the House Un-American Activities Committee." So me trying to stop bullying and stop whistleblowing retaliation against teachers reminds him of the McCarthy era in the House of Un-American Activities Committee in our history.
Oh, brother.
It would not be appropriate in any level for a member of the school committee to conduct investigations, and that's not what I said. I didn't say I was going to say I was going to be on a committee that looked into these accusations of, and so that's where we're at. When you said that they don't share any information, they don't. We cannot get a list. He will not give us a list. I told you about that those athletic director and the Cumberland football coach were found to have violated policies. He will not give us the discipline that was done to them. He said it's not, even as a school committee, he says it's not within your purview. You don't get to see that. So that was in August. Within, I think, 2 or 3 months, each of them was giving an award. So if they were disciplined for violating policies, how were they given an award? So they weren't disciplined at all, not at all. So we just had a band teacher that was fired for violating policies on inappropriate actions, violating policies on a field trip.
Are you allowed to talk about that?
Yeah, it's in the paper.
I know, I'm just joking.
It's in the paper, right? And that's the problem. Teachers, administrators, band leaders are not going to follow the policies when the consequences of not following the policies are nothing, are overlooked and covered up. They won't follow the policies.
So, just to reinforce the actionable items, show up. Come to the school committee meetings.
Yes.
Does that work? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Work on your state legislators too. You have a different you have another level of government here. Make sure you're talking to your state legislators. You're getting math that you can't understand. If they would change the standards, which some states have done, Florida they did, and put in basic math standards that are understandable, your school's going to align to that. That's what drives the school alignment. So state legislators, bullying, what does your bullying law look like? Because they're going to basically do what they have to do based on law. They're not going to do the right thing. It's what the law says. Those are the kinds of things to look at. So also engage your state legislators and see if you can get something passed, because it's a little hard. I mean, we're working on anti-bullying all the time at the state level. And it's interesting, and I'm sad to say it, I'm not happy about this, but we had anti-bullying legislation this year, and the Republicans supported it, and the Democrats were against it. And I thought, why is this partisan? I mean, of all things, that should not be partisan, but they don't want to hold the schools accountable. They don't want to hold the schools accountable, and that's what you're running into. Nobody wants to hold the school accountable.
So if you're a parent, this episode isn't a warning; it's a reality check.
Yeah,
It
no,
can make a
I
difference.
would love to see the the school committee seats filled with parents that are concerned and not there to yell at me.
Yeah, that would be
Concerned
awesome.
Parents to voice their concerns, right? So then,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we signed up for.
So do you know, like, do you guys have things to look at now, or are you like, do you have any final thoughts that you want to add to this conversation?
No, I thought it was a great
Questions?
conversation.
Yeah, we just got to keep pushing, And I
Yes.
said this in a recent meeting we had, that I understand that a lot of the administration in the school and other people on the school committee don't like what I'm doing, but I'm not going to stop doing it. And I'm not.
That's my motto.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to yell and scream and flail and foam at the mouth. I'm just going to be like
When-
Forrest Gump running through the desert. I'm just
when
going to
they-
keep going.
When they showed up to protest him, every time they get up there and would rail on him, they would go sit down. Everybody in the audience would clap. He was over there clapping as well.
It's because it's the dichotomy of the situation. They're there to protest me, but they're exercising their First Amendment rights,
Right.
and I wish more parents and more teachers would do that.
Yeah.
But would do that based on them paying attention to what's happening, and not somebody sending an email out
Yep.
saying, "Hey, rally the troops to come." And and it was extremely apparent when people were going up there talking, and it was about a podcast that they were protesting, something that was said on one of these podcasts, that they didn't even watch the podcast. They didn't watch the podcast.
Yeah.
And a lot of them admitted later that they had never watched the podcast. And they were commenting based on what somebody had told them.
Oh.
So I went back and watched it. I'm like, none of this is accurate. There were like maybe two people that spoke accurately about what was said. So, and I have no problem. I have no problem at all with people coming up, even if they're going to rail on me. Pay attention.
So in New Hampshire, the public comment, do they have a time limit on that?
Yeah, many schools do, and they, by law, if you go over and you're rambling on, they can set a time limit. So yes, most of them do. There are certain things though that they can't prevent free speech on. I mean, if you come up there and you talk about what's going on in Ukraine, yeah, they can shut that down. But if you're coming up and you're criticizing, the superintendent or the principal, they're really not supposed to shut you down on that. And I'm noticing that that's happening in New Hampshire. And I even wrote to the head of the school board's administration. I said, what is going on here? Why are your schools saying that, we can't go up and criticize somebody here? I've looked at court rulings and that's acceptable. You can't criticize the people that work for the government?
Right.
What the heck? So, those are the kinds of things to look at for sure.
So I think...
In Rhode Island, public bodies don't have a requirement for public comment.
Gotcha.
We don't respond. We give 3 minutes and we don't respond. We do have a public comment, but again,
But it's only 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Is there ever a way to get
you
past
have to
that 3 minutes?
You have to have a motion and a second, and then the majority has to agree to give somebody extra time.
Gotcha.
Sometimes school boards up by us will let people talk forever. I mean, they're just not control freaks.
Right.
So they're going to let, it's like we don't get anybody to the school board meeting. We finally get somebody and we're going to limit you to 3 minutes. That's kind of crazy. You could tell who's a control freak and who's not.
So this is not a drill. Go to the school committee meetings.
Yes.
Go to the town council meetings. And now you say,
Even
work
lobby
on your
legislators.
state.
Yeah.
Work on the state as well.
Yep.
And I think I'm going to wrap it up here a little bit, but is there anywhere that people can follow you? Like, where do you usually send people to find out more about what you're doing up in New Hampshire, and maybe things that they can do here?
I can give out my email address because that's pretty much public. It's Banfield Ann Marie, so it's BANFIELD ANNMARIE. Very simple, Banfield Ann Marie @gmail.com. I post on Granite Grok, and that's GRANITEGROK.
Okay.
So Granite Grok is a website, and they have many authors up in New Hampshire. They write about mainly political things. I focus on education. You can look under authors. You can click on my name, and you can read all of the articles. And my email is there. So if you didn't get my email, feel free to go there, and you can contact me through Granite Grok too.
So on the lower third there, I have the link granitegrok.com /authors /AM Banfield. That will actually take you to all of your articles.
Perfect. Yes, and people contact me all over the country. It happens all the time, so I'm happy to help anybody understand something better. I talk to school board members, sometimes teachers, parents mainly, but I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone.
And if you're listeners of Cumberland Unfiltered, you can find us at Cumberland Unfiltered on YouTube, on Rumble, all podcast platforms, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to podcasts, it's at Cumberland Unfiltered. That's where we're at. And we really appreciate you. Ann Marie?
Yep.
Ann Marie, we really appreciate you coming down here. So
thank you. That was awesome.
An incredible conversation.
Very informative.
Anything else you guys want to
I'll
add
have
to
to
it?
keep you updated, maybe have you back to talk about all the strides we will sure to have made in 3 years before the end of our...
Do a remote episode. We'll go up there.
Right on.
Yeah, we'll go up there.
Hey, we have a float now. No, that's not ours anymore. We can do live shows.
Nice.
From remotely. Anyway, that's it. Go like, subscribe, share, and comment. Tell us what you think. That's a wrap.